guys, it's Sean O'Connell, the managing director here at CinemaBlend, and we are talking about the ending of Dr. Sleep, both the book and the movie, and how they are different, because believe me, they are drastically different.
I don't know about magic. I always called it The Shining.
Of course, this is going to be filled with spoilers. If you have not seen Dr. Sleep and you do not want to know how the book or the movie ends, get out of here right now. However, for the rest of you guys, do me a favor. Go down, hit subscribe, and turn on your notifications. We're always breaking down huge entertainment stories on CinemaBlend's YouTube page. We want to make sure that you guys watch every single video that we do. By now, you know that Dr. Sleep is a sequel to Stephen King's book, The Shining, and it's also a sequel to the Stanley Kubrick adaptation from several years ago. What I want to get into first is how the book ended, because I think it's really important to discuss how Stephen King wanted to close his story, and it ends up being really different from what Mike Flanagan did in his film. In the book, by the time we get to the third act, Abra, the girl with all the gifted powers, and Danny Torrance, the grown-up version of the young boy from The Shining, do have to return to Colorado to confront Rose the Hat and her group, the True Knot. Danny kind of realizes first that the campground that they're going to be going to, that's owned by the True Knot, is of course the location of the Overlook Hotel, where he and his mother had to confront their father, Jack Torrance, who went full-on psychopath in The Shining and tried to kill them in the middle of the winter.
Here's Johnny!
Now, Danny is able to, using the shine, create a recreation of his bedroom from the Overlook Hotel, but that's largely the only place from the original book that is brought back to life. And Danny kind of creates that as a safe space for he and Abra to, use as a headquarters as they're trying to regroup and go after Rose, because they know that she has set up some type of an ambush. Now, it's worth noting that Abra is not actually there. She's back home safe on the East Coast, and she is projecting herself onto the Colorado location, again, using the shine that both she and Danny have. She's way more powerful than Danny is at this stage, though, and Danny's kind of using her because she has the ability to stop Rose. He just needs her there at that location. Now, Rose has an ace up her sleeve. There's a member of the True Knot that she has hidden away, and she's using it as an ambush so that if she's not able to get the upper hand on both Danny and Abra combined, she'll be able to pull this member from the True Knot out, get the jump on Danny, and ultimately prevail in her effort to try to get Abra's steam, which is what she ultimately needs. All of the ghosts that are present at the grounds of the Overlook, the former grounds of the Overlook, they all come back, and they help Danny essentially defeat Rose by pushing her off a cliff. It's referenced in the book that one of those spirits is Jack Torrance, Danny's father. It's almost written by King as like, after Danny prevails with the help of all of the evil spirits that are present at the former location of the Overlook, after they push Rose off of the cliff and finally do away with her, he kind of like looks off into the distance, sees a figure that is very clearly his father, and Danny kind of acknowledges, well, yes, of course, the spirit of Jack Torrance would still be here. This is where he died, and of course it makes sense that he's prevalent in this location. The book has, to me, a much happier ending, because in the epilogue, Danny is able to go back to Abra. He is present at her next birthday party. They kind of acknowledge the fact that, her shine is still incredibly strong. They still have this bond that links the two of them mentally, psychologically. And then Danny goes on to visit an ailing patient and continue his work as Dr. Sleep. Danny uses his shine to essentially work with patients in hospice centers and help them transition into the afterlife when they're on their deathbeds. And that's how he earns the nickname Dr. Sleep. And one of the last acts that he does in the book is to help a patient pass away peacefully, move on to the afterlife, and we assume he's going to continue on as Dr. Sleep. Mike Flanagan does some of that stuff, but he does a lot more in his movie. So let's break down what happens in the movie ending in our next section. Why is the movie version so different from the book? Well, Mike Flanagan wanted to make a sequel not just to The Shining book, but he clearly wanted to reference Stanley Kubrick's film, of which he is a major fan. So when we get to the third act, and Danny heads to Colorado to confront Rose the Hat and the members of the True Knot, he creates a lot more than just the bedroom from the Overlook. He actually creates the entire hotel. And it's here where the movie breaks free from Stephen King's book and becomes a full-on sequel to Kubrick's Shining film. And that's where it gets really, really disturbing, because I did not expect the end of Dr. Sleep to become this full-on sequel to the Kubrick version of The Shining, a movie of which King has said that he's not a huge fan because of the changes they make to Jack Torrance. Danny is actually able to step into a full recreation of the Overlook Hotel, and it is spot on. It feels like you're stepping into the old movie. You recognize the lobby and the rooms and the hallways, and of course the pattern of the carpet as young Danny's riding his tricycle through the hallways. It's like, it's such a beautiful recreation that it's disturbing to be able to go back into this old film. Flanagan has done an incredible job of rebuilding the Overlook, but then we get to a moment that will haunt me for years, which is Jack Torrance back on screen. And it's not a digital recreation of a young Jack Nicholson in the least bit. Instead, Mike Flanagan leans on Henry Thomas, an actor who he worked with in the brilliant Haunting of Hill House series on Netflix. And Henry Thomas does a Jack Nicholson in The Shining impersonation, and it is flawless. And I did not expect in the ending of Dr. Sleep to get a scene where Ewan McGregor, playing Danny Torrance, has an emotional conversation with his father, Jack Torrance, played by Henry Thomas. It's like, it's a scene from The Shining that I never dreamed we could possibly get, and yet here it exists on screen. So King, in his book, wanted to just make a subtle nod of like, Jack Torrance's spirit is still here, Danny recognizes it, and then he moves on with his life. Here we get an actual emotional scene between Danny and his father, and it is devastating. Mike Flanagan doesn't stop there, though. In addition to bringing back Jack Torrance in a masterful scene, all of the ghosts, the recognizable haunting characters from the movie The Shining, return in Dr. Sleep, and they are the ones who help Danny finally triumph over Rose the Hat. It's kind of gruesome how they pull her apart, essentially, but it's the twins, the hauntingly creepy twins. It's the guy who attends the cocktail party with blood, flowing down his face.
Great party, isn't it?
It's all of these disturbing images, except for the dog bear creature thingamabob, and you know who I'm talking about from The Shining. The dog bear creature does not show up. That's a missed opportunity, Mike Flanagan. You should have put that guy in there because I really wanted to see it. It's essentially Flanagan saying like, hey, if we're going back to the Overlook, I'm going back to the Overlook and I'm going to recreate the entire thing, and you're going to see all these characters again, and they're going to be relevant to this story, and they were. The boiler becomes responsible for the destruction of the Overlook, which is a nod to how things end in Stephen King's book. And in the fires of the Overlook, Danny Torrance actually dies. So that's a huge difference from what we saw in the book. And the reason why we know that Danny's dead is because in the end of the Dr. Sleep movie, Abra is still having a conversation with him, and it almost mirrors what we saw in the book, where they're able to sort of get together for an epilogue. But then it becomes very clear that Abra is not talking to Danny, she's talking to Danny's ghost, and that she's still able to use her shine to communicate with people who are in the afterlife. I greatly prefer what Mike Flanagan was able to do, and it's almost not fair because, King, when he wrote Dr. Sleep, was not trying to make a sequel in reference to Stanley Kubrick's film. In fact, King has said over the years that he doesn't really like some of the choices that Kubrick made in terms of the way that he portrayed Jack Torrance. And so he was not trying to correct the Kubrick film. But Flanagan seems like he was trying to correct that vision of the Kubrick film, or at least create a better bridge between the version that Stanley Kubrick did for The Shining and the existence of how it is in the book. This is now a perfect counterpart to that Kubrick film, and I almost think that now that film is like part one of a two-part longer story, and Dr. Sleep goes perfectly with it. Because of my love of the Kubrick film and because of the way that Flanagan treats it with such respect, I'm going to say that the film adaptation of Dr. Sleep is just a better overall version of that story. And it's interesting because so much of the Shining imagery was present in the marketing campaign, and I think that Warner Brothers used that as a way to alert casual fans of like, hey, Dr. Sleep is actually a Shining sequel. I know it doesn't say the word Shining in it. It's not like The Shining Part 2, but it's definitely the story of Danny Torrance and what happens to him as he's grown up. It was a good way to lure in casual viewers, but it turns out that wasn't just like lip service to the Stanley Kubrick film. Flanagan had real reasons to go back to the Overlook and to bring that imagery from Kubrick's film into Dr. Sleep and make it a better movie. I think without those images, it becomes a good adaptation of a Stephen King book, but not quite the great overall movie that Dr. Sleep ends up being. All right, guys, tell me what you thought about the ending of the Dr. Sleep movie. Are you a Stephen King purist and you do not like the way that Mike Flanagan made some changes to the end? Or were you really happy to go back to the Overlook Hotel and relive some of those scenes from Stanley Kubrick's classic film? Head down in the comment section and tell me which one you prefer, why you prefer one or the other, or what else you would have liked to have seen. While you're down in that comment section, of course, do me a favor, hit subscribe and turn on your notifications. We are going to post videos like this all the time on our YouTube page, and you have to see every single one of them.